This is Phoenix Gaming, and I'm your host, Chris. Today we're going to go over the first episode of Terrain and Me, a Beginner's Guide, which is a series that is going to explore the different terrain features in Warhammer 40K and try to break them down into a nice, digestible format for new and beginning players so that the game doesn't seem quite as daunting. Our first episode is Woods, so let's dive right in. What are woods? Woods are an area terrain that provides dense cover, breachable, defensible, and difficult ground. So all of these are just words. You hear them, I hear them. They don't mean anything to any of us. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each one of these and break it down. Typically, what you do see on a table that represents woods is some sort of footprint. We'll go over that in a little bit, and then trees on top of it just to annotate that they are trees. So let's start off with the footprint. It is area terrain. An area terrain is defined as any feature with a footprint. Now, the concept of a footprint is really just for competitive play. Like, we don't have to have a physical footprint or outline on the table in order to play. That's something that really is more for competitive play in tournaments. You can put them on there even for casual play just because it just makes it easier. It's easier to see the defined space that the terrain is supposed to take up. So any feature that has a footprint is area terrain. The ground level of that feature is considered the battlefield. What that means is that the footprint is not actually technically part of the feature, and that goes into what I just said. So when you have a footprint, it is not part of the feature. It's just an outline or a bucket. And inside that outline or bucket is the feature itself. And then everything within that outline counts as the feature. Infantry, Beast, and Swarm receive the benefit of cover as it is defined by the feature while they are within the footprint. What this means is that while an Infantry, Beast, and Swarm model are within the footprint, they receive the benefit of cover. Now, dense cover is a little different because it's not restricted to Infantry, Beast, and Swarm, but we'll get into that. But really, this just means that while you're touching the footprint, you just get the benefit of cover. And it's pretty straightforward. And by touching it, you actually have to be over it. You can't just be touching it. It is within, not adjacent to, if that makes sense. Area terrain features cannot be attacked. So next, we're going to talk about dense cover and how it works and interacts with the game. So dense cover is one of the few, I think it's actually the only type of cover that is reliant on line of sight. And what that means is you don't have to have line of sight, but you draw lines to it. So if we look at the example here, the black base is the shooting unit, the orange bases are the target units, the big green area is our footprint for woods, and this unit would not receive the benefit of dense cover from the woods. And if you look at why, when we draw our lines, that's what the blue cones are. When we draw our lines, you can draw them from any portion of the shooting model's base, but they have to go to all visible portions or all portions of the target model's base. So what that means is that you have a cone. You pick any point on your base and you make a cone, and if that cone passes through the terrain feature at any point, then that model or that unit will receive the benefit of cover. And do remember that it's by model, it's not by unit. But what that means is that neither of these target orange bases have the benefit of cover because the cone doesn't touch the terrain feature at all. Period. End of discussion. So this unit would not benefit from dense cover from this attacking model. Okay, so let's look at another example of a unit that would not benefit from dense cover. Now, if you look at the difference here, the footprint is pushed out, and then both of the models in the orange circles are actually touching the footprint. So you think, I'm within the footprint, I should get dense cover. No, you don't. Because again, it's based off of these lines of sight. So if we look at these blue cones, if you look at them, you can draw these lines and they don't pass through the feature at any point. And because they don't pass through the feature at any point, then your model or unit would not receive the benefit of dense cover. And that is how that would interact. So simply touching the footprint isn't enough. You basically have to have a visible portion of your model in the footprint, so that line of sight has to be drawn through the model or terrain feature itself. Now we're going to look at this. These models would benefit from dense cover because as we draw our cones for line of sight, the cones pass through the feature in order to hit all visible portions of the base. So this means that this unit would benefit from the -1 to hit from dense cover. Now, that is only from this specific attacking unit. There are differences. So if our black base here, our shooting unit, was in the feature with the target unit, they'd have to be in the same feature, then neither of those units would receive dense cover, if that makes sense. So that just means that if they're both in the same woods specifically, you get to ignore the -1 to hit penalty imposed by woods, okay? So the reason we're talking about this is because I've been to a lot of tournaments, and typically the tournament scene is pretty good with their rules, but this is one that I see get kind of messed up regularly. And I don't usually take the time to correct people on it, not because I don't want to or because of anything other than I just don't care. Like, it's not that big of a deal to me. If you feel like you need that -1 to hit penalty against my orcs while they're shooting at you, fine. Like, I don't sweat that. But I just want to try to make this easier for players to understand. Touching the footprint for dense cover simply isn't enough. You need to actually have your model be inside the footprint enough that line of sight has to be drawn through the footprint. So let's talk about the rest of this beast. Woods are breachable, and all that means is that infantry, beast, and swarm can move through the pieces that make up the feature, such as girders, trees, walls, etc., as if they weren't there. And all that means is that, like, there's a tree, I can move my model through the tree. However, I cannot end my movement in a way that would prevent my base from being placed. So if the base doesn't clear the tree when you move it, guess what? He doesn't get to move there, or she. You know, you get to move through walls and things as if they weren't there, but you can't end your movement in them or on them. You still have to finish your movement off of them. Woods are defensible, infantry only. And this is by unit. This is not by model. When the unit is wholly on or within an area feature with this trait, or wholly within 3 inches of an obstacle with this trait, and when you use an obstacle, you still need the same line of sight lines that you would need for determining dense cover. So, but we'll cover obstacles later. That's a whole different can of worms. But if you're wholly on or within an area feature with this trait, basically what that means is you get to either hold steady or set to defend. If you hold steady, you get to overwatch on 5s, and if you set to defend, you get to add 1 to your hit rolls in the subsequent fight phase. However, if you set to defend, you are not eligible to fire overwatch. So these are things to keep in mind. This is important. You know, a lot of people don't think about this, but you know, this is an important thing. And honestly, like, I always forget that woods are also defensible. So try to remember that, guys and girls. Difficult ground. So woods are difficult ground. And what that means is you must subtract 2 inches from your normal moves, your advance moves, your fallbacks. And then when you make a charge roll, you have to subtract 2 from your charge roll. And as long as this penalty is imposed, as long as any model in the unit is either on, in, or has to pass through the feature with that trait. So this one is also not by model, it's by unit. This one is important though. If you've got one model that's in a woods and you want to charge, your whole unit subtracts 2 from the charge roll. Everybody else doesn't get to move the full charge, and then that one model moves -2. It's all of them. So If you've got one model in a woods and you're out of deep strike, that's an 11-inch charge for the unit. Does not matter. Other than that, it doesn't affect your consolidations and pile-ins, things like that. It only affects your normal moves, advance, fallback, and charge rolls. I hope that I did an adequate job of breaking down woods for you. Leave any comments or questions in the comments section. We have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Phoenix Gaming Space. You can find me on Twitter at 2NerdsChris, and we'll be working on obscuring next. Thank you.